Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, the creator and host of our show. Today we welcome Greg Larson. Greg is an entrepreneur, author, storyteller, editor, business owner, and recently released Clubbie, an insider's look at minor league baseball. One thing that jumped out at me when we talked with Greg was his perspective on failure. He said curiosity around failure and struggles to succeed is critical to growth. I know that you're going to enjoy the episode today, so on to the ascent. Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, the creator and host of our show, and I am excited to be with you this afternoon and really excited to introduce to you somebody who I actually met recently. However, we have a relationship in that I really owe a lot to his dad. Because without his dad and his dad's education, I would not be the entrepreneur that I am today. So thank you so much, Rick Larson. And of course, Rick Larson is Greg Larson's dad. So I'm really excited to have Mr. Greg Larson with us today. Now, I'm going to introduce Greg in just a second. However, I want to share with you the best way you can help us is to follow us. Subscribe to our show, The Success Ascent, at Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite sources are. You can also go to www.thesuccessascent.com and subscribe for updates. So let's talk with Greg. So I'm going to do the intro, and then we're going to ask to find out who the real Greg is. So Greg Larson is an author, and he just recently, in fact, we were talking about it just before we started. It's one of Amazon's top sellers in the sports category, if you may. He's the author of Clubbie, a minor league baseball memoir. And in my research, I watched and listened to a few things about it. So I'm really excited to get the tell-all, if you may. He spent 2 seasons as the club attendant in the Baltimore Orioles organization. He's also a stand-up comedian, and he performs regularly in Austin, Texas. He's also the editor and owner of Apollo Media. His clients have been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, USA Today Bestseller, and Wall Street Journal's Bestseller. He's got a Bachelor of Arts in English. He's a ghostwriter, also has an MFA in creative writing from Old Dominion University. So, Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
So I always have some fun with my client, with the folks that join us on the episodes here. And I say, okay, that was the kind of written, the scripted Greg Larson. Tell us who really the Greg Larson that's in front of us today is. Like, who's the real Greg?
That's a hard question. I mean, maybe I'd have to consult with my therapist first, but I think in short, I'm a storyteller, and that's the core of it. That's it. I tell stories, whether they're my own or other people's.
And so we were talking in the beginning, kind of what got you excited about writing a book, obviously, is you've written a number of books as a ghostwriter, a number like it was in the hundreds, you said.
As an editor, I've probably written as a ghostwriter 30 plus. It's hard to keep track of even, but as an editor as well, it's well over 100. So you write this book. It's called Clubbie, a minor league baseball memoir, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Yet, before we get into that journey, what kind of brought you to the clubhouse? Like, I mean, what brought you to baseball? Yeah, I think it's unusual for somebody who loves baseball so much to fall in love with it as late as I did. I mean, I didn't find the game until I was 13, 14 years old. It was the years, I grew up in Minnesota, so I was a huge Twins fan. And those years in the early 2000s, the Minnesota Twins were on the brink of contraction, and they were being threatened to be cut out of Major League Baseball. So I saw these guys as underdogs. I saw the standings one day, and I saw that they were in first place, fighting for their lives, in some ways quite literally, to stay in Major League Baseball. And I just got hooked from then. And from that time going forward, I just wanted to be a Major League Baseball player myself. I thought I'd be like a scrappy, brilliant defensive, but light-hitting second baseman was my goal.
I love it.
And I mean, I was, Pat, like Minnesota's not a baseball state because you can only play like a month and a half out of the year.
Right.
It's a hockey state, and probably snowmobiling is bigger than baseball in Minnesota. And so I still had these dreams of being a ball player. I got cut from my Division III school, Hamlin University. I transferred to a school in South Carolina. I got a Division I baseball scholarship, but it was as an equipment manager. And then when I graduated, that was my only job experience that I had in the whole world, was washing jock straps. And I thought, okay, I don't think I consciously thought that I was still going to be a ball player, but I think unconsciously there's something inside of me that thought I would still have some Rudy moments where maybe I would have a chance to get on the field and just like steal an at bat. And they say, well, who's this kid from the upper woods of Minnesota? We got to give him a contract. And so I just found myself in that clubhouse as a dude who loves baseball, working in the Orioles organization, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
So how did that happen? Like, was there an ad in the paper for, Baltimore Orioles clubhouse attendant?
Pretty much. I mean, it's such a weird thing because I didn't realize until years after the fact, but those jobs, they usually don't show up in a job listing. But I happened to find it in a job listing online. They were desperate. It just so happened that they didn't have anybody to pass that job on to. Because a clubhouse attendant job is usually a highly coveted position that somebody will stay in for years. And, you get to be around future major leaguers, past major leaguers, and the coaching staff and all of these amazing parts of baseball. So they'll get handed down to somebody's nephew or somebody's son or somebody's grandson.
Right.
It just so happened that my graduating college and my having that experience in college as a clubhouse attendant for my college team just so happened to coincide with the Orioles having in that opening. It was a total perfect alignment of the stars.
Wow. So you get hired as the attendant, the clubhouse attendant for Baltimore Orioles minor league team. Like, what was that like? You described it. I'd like you to describe it because I know you describe it in the book, and yet it's not the glamorous thing that everybody thinks it is.
I mean, in the stadium I was in. Now, keep in mind, I quite literally lived in the stadium my second year, but so I spent a lot of time. It was Ripken Stadium, Aberdeen, Maryland. The Aberdeen Ironbirds, they're owned by the Ripken family. And so it's a beautiful stadium and facility. But that world is so, look, like I realized that the world is not what I thought it was when I saw the salary scale for the players initially, where the guys were making less than $4,500 a year as professional ball players in the Orioles organization. And I, as the guy who's washing their jock straps, I was making 3 times as much as them. And immediately I thought, wow, there's something messed up going on here. And when I saw guys fighting each other over music choices to the point where guys were taking baseball bats to each other's heads. Guys were walking out in the middle of games. I was feeding players, wrinkly old hot dogs from the concessions. And these are future major leaguers or potentially future major leaguers. It was so shocking how crappy their lives were. And yet there was constantly this tension of me still wanting to be one of them, thinking, best case scenario, if I had never been cut from my Division III team, if I had never bat .091 in high school, this is my best case scenario, and I still want to be them. And then I became part of the system that was taking advantage of them. Like I'd try and scam them for extra money. I'd run schemes to get tips from them, all this stuff. It was a complicated relationship with the game.
Yeah. And I know you talked about this a little bit. There's this that twinkle, maybe that one kind of opportunity to make it to the big leagues, and that's what they're there for. And and it's funny that you mentioned hockey. Last night the Wild were playing, and there was a guy who I think it's Luke Johnson. He was in the minors and had somewhere near 300 games, I think it was, in the minors, and he scored his first NHL goal last night. So it's just that for that one moment to make it to the big leagues and shine.
I feel a bit ambivalent when I hear stories like that, because those are the ones inevitably. It's a the success bias, where people think that just because something brought them eventually to success, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work for other people. And so we spotlight sometimes these unreplicable circumstances. So in baseball, we love to tell stories around this mythology around the guy who struggled for years and maybe even decades in the minor leagues. And then after all these years of struggle and turmoil, he eventually gets to the majors, and look at how amazing this success is. And that's very true. But there is something dangerous about that mythology, because we do not highlight the stories of the guys who fight for all those years and never make it.
Right.
To me, that's the core of this book that I wrote, because those are the most fascinating. There's something curious to me about failure, not only in myself, but in professional sports in particular. There's something so much more fascinating about struggling your hardest and never making it, because I think we don't talk about it enough.
Right. Yeah, we feature about the success, but not about the struggles.
Right. And so I think that's highlighted more in baseball than in any other sport. I think as a byproduct of the fact that the draft is so long and has so many players. It's changing this year, but it used to be 40 plus rounds in the draft, so 1,000 plus guys would get drafted every year. So with all of those people, inevitably the laws of high averages are going to lead to certain kinds of stories of all kinds. There's too many guys living too many different lives.
Well, and you think about it, and I think about this on occasion, your teams come out and then they, people make the team for the year. And then the next year, there's a whole new wave of people that come into the system. Yet, where do all those people go? Because most of them didn't leave the field last year, right? And that's what you're talking about, is these people toil and toil, and yet nobody thinks about them.
For sure. I was there for 2 seasons with the Aberdeen Ironbirds. The second season was an almost completely new team. The only thing that was the same was the stadium and the jerseys. That was it. Half of them, they get moved up, and the other half of them, they get released, and there are a couple of them that stick around on the same team. And look, like at the level I was at, short season, single A, bottom of the barrel minor league baseball. So bottom of the barrel that the league that I was in as a clubhouse attendant no longer exists. The New York Penn League was wiped off the map in the last year. Wow. If you're sticking around there for longer than 1 season, something's wrong, and you need to get a kick in the ass either out the door or up in the organization.
Oh, wow. So like, I don't want to get real deep in the book because I want to talk about your journey. Sure. But you mentioned the conversation in the book is really about the struggles, not about the superstars. Would that be a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I think that's part of a big part. Yes, that's accurate. The book, I don't feel is about baseball even. It's about love. Baseball is just a backdrop to explore these deeper issues of what it's like to grow up in a game that tries to keep us young, what it's like to love another person in a relationship when you have a hard time loving yourself. And all of these parallels between my life and the players' lives and how they intertwine in this really complicated and interesting way is the core of it, much more than saying, oh, I used to be a clubhouse attendant for the Trey Mancini and Mike Yastrzemski. I'm not interested in that as much. So the book isn't so much about that.
So we're going to I want to get into the book. I want to ask you one other question on it. What prompted you to write a book? I mean, besides the fact that this is what you did for a living, right?
Right.
What was kind of the defining moment to go, I got to write my own book?
I've always, for this one in particular, there was a moment in 2012 when I had been a clubhouse attendant for less than 2 weeks. And my best friend on the team, Alex Schmarzo, a relief pitcher who struggled a lot with anxiety, and I experienced a lot of anxiety, so we connected with each other. He pulled me aside, and he gave me this beautiful metaphor of minor league baseball being like scratching lottery tickets, where you scratch lottery tickets with your friends, and you're in a group, and you're spending money doing it every day. Inevitably, if enough guys are in a room playing the lottery, one of them is going to win. And every time you see one of them win, in this case, get moved up in the organization, you think, well, if they can do it, so can I. But then you come back the next day and you pay another $1 and you spend another day and maybe you waste that time that never turns into anything. He said that's what it's like to play short season single A baseball. And I thought, my God, there's some story here. I didn't know what the story was, but from that moment, I was taking obsessive notes and journal. Like I keep a pretty obsessive journal. It's less obsessive now, to the point where I would write down specific conversations, I'd write down specific scenes. And so for those 2 seasons, I had 285 pages of notes that turned into this book.
Yeah. And I know some of the excerpts from the book that I've experienced, it's like you're living there. It's like you're right there in the dugout as if you were experiencing it just through your eyes. So I love that part. So you shared with me before we started, and I really want to talk about this process. So you decide you're going to write a book. You've edited tons of books. You're ghostwritten a number of other books. So this isn't new to you, right? This isn't.
When I was writing Clubbie, I hadn't started my ghostwriting career yet. That's the interesting part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. Go ahead.
Well, so once I started to try and get Clubbie published, that was around the time I started my ghostwriting career, and I put Clubbie on the back burner. And look, it was a 95,000 word draft, and I had agents telling me it was too long. I'd say I got rejected by 100 plus agents, and then I put it on the back burner.
Okay,
And I
stop
started,
right there. Stop right
yes,
there.
sir.
You got rejected 100 times.
Yes, at least. Those are only the ones that I kept track of in my spreadsheet. There are more, but yeah.
So what kept you going? Because entrepreneurs struggle and they get rejected and they hit ceilings, and the successful ones keep going, and obviously you did. So what was the driving force to you to keep persevering?
That's a good question, man. I think there was something inside of me that knew that I had a story here that was interesting. It's hard to not sound cliche, but I just had this, no matter how disappointed I got, I still had this burning feeling inside of myself, that this self-belief that just never fully went away. It got dampened,
Yeah,
but it just never went away. And there's so much in the ethos of publishing that prepares us for failure that I think was also helpful. A lot of it is self-defeating, I think, in the literary world. That's a whole other story, but I think I harnessed that, like, okay, every failure is going to get me closer to a success. But after that 100 plus, again, I have a 95,000 word manuscript, too long. I didn't know it at the time. I start ghostwriting and editing that career, and I completely left Clubbie alone. It was too painful at that point. At that point, I thought that my self-determination was completely extinguished. I was like, well, I'm just going to write other people's books, and maybe one day down the line, someday in decades, years down the line, I'll publish this book. But man, I don't know what triggered me to just say, you know what, screw it, I'm getting back to it.
Yeah.
I had a mentor, actually, Nikki Van Noy. She gave me the kick in the ass that I needed, because I said that I was going to self-publish the book, and like, I've helped a lot of people self-publish, no knock on that. But I felt like self-publishing this book would have been an admission of defeat, because I'd wanted a book contract so bad, much like a baseball player might want a baseball contract, you know?
Yep.
And so I went to my mentor, Nikki, and she had worked at Random House. She had done a ton of amazing publishing stuff. And she said, how would you feel if you self-published this book? After 100 rejections, I would say I'd given up. And she says, that's because that's exactly what it would be. She's like, look, sometimes it's not she gave me an example of somebody she knew who had been rejected 50 plus times and who had gotten a book deal. And she said, she's not nearly the writer that you are, Greg. So there's no reason that you should be stopping now. You have something here. And that's what got me restarted. I edited Clubbie. Having done all of this ghostwriting and editing for business books, I all of a sudden had like the copywriting ability to cut down about 20,000 words to go with this like literary artistic ability that had gotten me this first draft. And it was like all of these skills that I had honed over the last 5 years all just like came together. I cut the book down. I got rejected in the end, I got rejected by 221 agents and publishers, including my eventual publisher, University of Nebraska Press. They rejected me once before they took me on.
Wow.
I signed my contract in September of 2019, and the book came out last week.
Wow. So they said no 220 people ago, and now, oh, wait, yes, we want to publish it.
Of course, but it really wasn't University of Nebraska Press. They rejected that first draft that was like 20,000 words longer. Then I shaved it down, and they're like, "We're with you."
Wow, wow. I mean, talk about a story, an entrepreneurial story of perseverance. I know this is a product of love, a project of love. I mean, I could see it. I could, just talking to you and hearing you talk about it and watching the things I did before I interview you, I can tell it just comes from your heart. Yet, as an entrepreneur, I mean, you were working on a project and you basically hit ceilings and you persevered through those. And the thing that I love that you shared, which is common of a lot of successful entrepreneurs, business owners, authors, is there's always a mentor, there's always a coach, there's always somebody in the background, right? That right. At some moment, the right moment shows up, says the right things, and it really, ignites it. So good for Nikki on putting you in that position and pushing you through.
For sure, because I'm a fiery guy, but everybody has a limit, and I had reached my limit at that point and she just relit that fire, and I don't think I would have done that on my own, quite frankly.
So what surprised you? Like it's a question, interesting one. What was different about you doing your own book versus you helping other people do their books? I'm just curious.
Oof. On the surface, it looks very similar. Typing it out on the computer. This was a much more research heavy project. I mean, look, like to write Clubbie, I was going into microfilm rooms and looking up old New York Times articles about the 1945 World Series. I mean, that's part of the process. I never once did that for a CEO's business book.
Interesting.
It's a very different process. And, the ghostwriting process, at least that I employ, is so talk heavy, it's conversation heavy, where I'm, much like you're doing with me, Pat, you're asking me and you're trying to get me to tell interesting stories, but you're also trying to extract wisdom from me that you can share with other people. That's exactly what I do when I start to interview somebody who's a ghostwriting client, and I record those conversations and then turn those recordings into a book. And so that was just a completely different process. Even though the final result is bound and it has words on a page and it looks similar from the outside, the process is shockingly different.
Yeah. Well, it's personal too, right? I mean, it's personal.
Oh yeah. Of course. I mean, there are all kinds of things in this book that I did not want to divulge, but I knew that I had to if I wanted to tell the most complete and most entertaining and maybe most effective story that I possibly could.
Well, and so let's shift to that a little bit. And it was interesting. So book has been very successful. You tell the stats, because I would love to encourage people to go buy it because it sounds like a great book that they can learn so much from. So top on Amazon seller.
Yeah, it's been right now is the #1 bestseller in the baseball biographies category. It's been #1 in the baseball category. It's been #1 in the sports industry. All this stuff. It's sold 1,000 hardcovers the first day. It's just all that vanity metrics. It's been doing well on in this first week.
And downloads and Audible, it could be in the millions by now.
I don't know. The Kindle version was up for $1, so who freaking knows? My dad accidentally bought 1,100 copies of the $1 Kindle. I had to walk him through returning 1,000 of them.
Oh, no, he should have given them away. Come on, Rick. Let's think differently. I love that. Okay, so book comes out, but you got some concerns. Like some of the things in the book are a little bit edgy.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of conversation in professional baseball right now around how minor league baseball players are treated, which used to be a very under the wraps, nobody knew about it kind of thing. But now with work like what I'm doing with Clubbie and people exposing what really goes on in minor league baseball, Major League Baseball is now being forced to make some changes that I don't think they enjoy for their pocketbooks and their bottom line. For example, this year, coinciding with the release of Clubbie, Major League Baseball is increasing their salaries 38 to 72% for minor leaguers, which it is a great first step. It's awesome improvement, but that turns out to, for their single A players at the level I was working at, instead of getting paid $290 a week, they get paid approximately $400 a week. And so these improvements is a drop in the ocean. And so when they see a story that's so evocative, like you said, it puts you right there. It's one thing to hear the numbers of a world like this, but to actually see it in scene so dramatically rendered, right. I think it is a much more impactful for people and maybe makes them say like, man, this world is a lot more messed up than I even realized. So, I've had the Baltimore Orioles are disallowing their minor league affiliates from promoting the book. I've had executives from the New York Mets. I've had executives from the Atlanta Braves, who I will not name, who have emailed me telling me that my messaging is offensive, all these kinds of things, that I'm disrespectful. God. I mean, it's classic baseball, just the traditional establishment. Maybe there are a lot of industries where you speak up for what you believe and people push back for you. In baseball, it seems to be a very, very traditionalist ethos.
Well, Greg, let me let this cat out of the bag, and this might be controversial. I'm not sure that you can please anybody in today's world, right? You're going to offend some people, and the fact of the matter is you're standing on your values and your principles, and I would just, acknowledge that. And, when you stop and think about it, just to go into, and again, I don't know this world, I'll just put it out there. It's not like these guys show up for a game at 6:00. I mean, this is like a full-time gig during the season, and then the off season's like a full-time gig preparing to make $400 a week. Holy Hannah.
Yeah, it's more than a full-time gig. I mean, these guys, if you include bus trips, if you include training regimens, and you include all that pre-work, I mean, they might be at the stadium for 14, 15 hours a day, right, if you include all the travel. So it's ridiculous. So if I'm going to aggravate anybody, by the way, players have been so overjoyed with the book. If I'm going to aggravate anybody and I aggravate the establishment of Major League Baseball, amen, brother. I stand with myself and I stand with the players.
Yeah, because they're making all the great decisions right now too, aren't they? We'll just leave that one alone for a while.
Right.
Okay, so now let's go back to the book. So what have you learned that you would share with people? Because like I shared with you, I have a desire to write a book. What have you learned since you released the book that you would share with folks?
Since I released the book, that's an interesting one. I was really hesitant. Like I said, there are lots of parts of this book that I thought were I had an anxiety that I was being unsympathetic, not only to myself in the book, but also to the people in the book. Because writing about real people, regardless of the type of book you're writing, whether it's a case study in a business book or a memoir or whatever, it's scary because you want to render them truthfully, warts and all, but you also want to render them sympathetically. And I worried that I hadn't done that. So far, every single person who's been characterized in the book has loved how I portrayed them, and they felt it was accurate, and they felt that it was fun and funny, and they loved seeing that reflection of themselves. I think a lot of people writing a book allow that to stop themselves from going as deep as they could. In a way, my book would have been way less impactful if I had pulled punches, so to speak, if I had given a less complete rendering of everybody. And I think that applies to business books and memoirs all over.
So I want you to share, before we shift gears here a little bit, I want you to share, because I love in doing the initial research. Tell me about the people smelling the bats. Tell me, because I never knew that.
Yes. So there's this strange anomaly that I used to think was only superstition, where if you're a batter, and let's say you get a 95 plus mile an hour fastball straight down the middle, and you take a home run cut at the ball. If you just barely, let's say this is the bat, this pen, and this is the baseball coming at the bat. If you just barely undercut the baseball, what will happen is that the friction of the wood on the bat and the friction of the leather on the baseball will actually increase its velocity as it goes straight back towards the backstop. And what that does, because it's such a momentary and it's such a fast and it's such a barely touching interaction between bat and ball, it will actually create this burning smell. It'll burn the wood of the bat for just a split second. And you can actually see it. It's very rare. I've only seen it happen once in a major league game in the last, 10 years. If a baseball player fouls a ball straight back, you can sometimes see them put their bat up to their nose to smell the burning wood. And I just love those idiosyncrasies of the game, because I grew up loving the game and I didn't even know that until I became a clubbie. Those just moments that makes baseball so beautiful.
Yeah. And some of them we never see because they're not on camera, right? I mean,
right.
Because the game happens. So let's shift gears, Greg, and let's talk about your success journey. So I always ask my guests, what's the best advice you've ever been given that hopefully you follow in your success journey?
Yeah. As I was writing the first draft of Clubbie, I was a graduate student at Old Dominion University, and I would write in the library. 2,000 words per day was my goal, which I'd gotten from a Stephen King book on writing. And I was sitting there just staring at the page, and I was struggling to get my 2,000 words for the day. And, I had my hand on my chin, just staring, furrowed brow at the screen. And another mentor of mine, Beth Vincelette, who had been a boss of mine at the university, she just walked past. I hadn't seen her in weeks, but she walked past. She did not say hello to me. She did not say, how are you doing? She did not say, it's good to see you. She just walked right past, and she just said, almost over her shoulder, she said, don't think so hard, and just kept on walking. And it's like she knew that I can get in my head, especially on the page. And there's so much nested in that comment of get out of your own way. You're a creator. You're a storyteller. Just allow yourself to do it. Don't think so hard. She was really telling me to trust my unconscious mind and to trust my instincts on the page. That is some of the best creative advice I've ever gotten. Just that one sentence over the shoulder.
Wow. Yeah, because there's so many things that would come into that, right?
Of course. I mean, what doesn't that apply to as well?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna actually throw you a curveball.
Okay.
Because I love your dad. What's the best advice Rick's ever given you?
I can tell. I can think of a couple of things. Okay, here's one.
Because, by the way, Rick is one of the smartest people that I know. One of the smartest people that I know. And a lot of people don't know how much he's impacted real estate, both in Minnesota and now in Florida, and in fact, the country. So I wanted to throw you a curveball because I love Rick. And so
of course,
here's great advice.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the one that he would like me to tell, and I'm going to tell you the one that he would not like me to tell. They're both equally impactful for me. Here's the one that he would like me to tell that I think is great, relationships-wise. He once told me, when I was thinking about hiring a graphic designer for something related to Clubbie, I asked my dad if I should go with this person that I know who was going to be more expensive or this person that I didn't know online who would be cheaper. And he said to me, he told me a long story around it. My dad's a great guy. If you ask him the time, he'll tell you how to build a watch. But he told me this long story. He said, you don't have a bank, you have a banker. As in, getting the cheaper price with somebody is not nearly as important as building a relationship with somebody. In the story that he gave me, having a banker that might change institutions, that you always have that banker. And I love that. I live, especially as a CEO of a ghostwriting firm, and especially as somebody who does a lot of design work and a lot of creations, right. I have used that idea in every aspect of my working life. Now, here's the piece of advice that I don't think he would like me to share. I was struggling making friends.
By the way, Greg, this is why I do these podcasts, because this is what I love. I love it.
It's all been leading up to this, Pat.
Yep.
I was struggling to make friends my freshman year of college, and I just, if everybody around you is the asshole, you're the asshole. It was one of those things where I was like, these people are jerks, all this stuff. And my dad said, you don't have to go out of your way to give people love or time or attention. He said, all you need to do is give them a chance. And if they take that chance and they show you that they're good people, then you can build a relationship with them. Yeah. And if you give them that chance and it turns out that they are assholes, then try to sell them something. I was like,
I love that.
That stuck with me as well.
Love that. Well, you know what? For anybody who knows Rick, I think that relationship comment about what he told you the first time is dead on, because if anybody knows Rick, he is all about building relationships. So I'm so glad that you shared that. I love that. So let's flip it upside down. What's the worst advice you've ever been given that hopefully you didn't follow?
I think I did not follow this. I had a professor, again, it goes back to the literary and writing world. There are a lot of self-defeating mentalities that are sometimes difficult to overcome. And I had a professor try and give marketing advice, and he said that the best books will be discovered by the world, and that the world and readers have a way of finding the best work and lifting it up into the collective unconscious. And I thought, that's bullshit. That is so not true. Because I think especially in artistic endeavors, in creative endeavors, and being a CEO is a very creative endeavor, it is not always a meritocracy.
Right.
You do have to be talented, and you do have to know what to do. But there's a baseline where you only have to be good enough. And from there, it's just effort. Like I was not the best writer in my program, not even in my cohort. I was maybe the third or fourth best writer. I happened to be experiencing a lot more success than a lot of those people, not because I'm a more skilled artist than them or more creative than them, but because I refuse to give up. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, writing a book is not easy, whether it's ghostwritten, whether it's something that I think, I've interviewed a lot of folks on our show. Many have written books. Everybody wants to write a book. I don't think you could come across a person that would say, yeah, I'd love to write a book. And yet very few do. And it's because it's not easy. I mean, it's a process. And clearly, 200 plus people telling you, yeah, not so good. It'd be real easy to quit at that point.
For sure.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, you know what, Greg? I want you to come up with a final thought to leave us with. I'm scrolling down in the bottom right now. If you're watching this live or you're going to watch it later on, they can go to clubbiebook.com, get the book. Obviously, it's available at Amazon and wherever you can buy books. And Kindle And so I really would encourage you, the excerpts that I've seen you guys, the book, I haven't got my book yet. It's on the way. So the excerpts I've seen, though, it really is a great read from what I've seen so far. So everybody, first of all, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to ask Greg for his final thought. We'd love you to give us feedback on our episode, subscribe at your favorite podcast source, or go to www.thesuccessascent, and you can sign up and get our updates and anything that we push out. So, Greg, as we close, give us a final thought. What would you share with our listeners before we go here?
Watch your self-talk. I struggle with self-talk a lot, and I think it's inhibited me at different points in my life. And what I notice is that the way I talk to myself is usually what the world reflects back to me. Maybe it takes a while for that to happen, but inevitably my self-talk becomes what happens in the world. And I think that too often, especially entrepreneurs, especially people who are incredibly successful, what drives them to success is sometimes a self-loathing that they're trying to overcome, which is absolutely beneficial, but it can become too much. Yeah. Love yourself and reflect it in how you talk to yourself.
Yeah, those we have stories we tell ourselves, and they're either true stories or not true stories, and yet some limit us and some help us drive through those ceilings. So what a great thought to leave us with. Well, listeners, you know what? Go out and buy Greg's book. If you need help in the ghostwriting and publishing, I'm pretty sure that Greg can help you with that as well. So thanks so much, Greg, for being here today. As I end all of our shows with, be healthy, be happy, be safe. Have an awesome day, everybody. Take care. See you later, Greg.
Thank you.
If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to The Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next Ascent.